The name of this course is How to Write. Now, built into the title of the course is the belief that you can write, because if it can't be taught, then what are we doing here? We're wasting our time. I don't believe in wasting your time. I believe you can write. I believe you can write. I know you can write. Now let me show it to you and prove it to you. I want you to think back to a time when you couldn't do something, and then you could. Like when you walked. The first time you walked, did you succeed perfectly at it? Of course not. Same thing when you rode a bicycle. Same thing when you're learning how to write, and you've already learned how to write. Just think of the physical act of writing with your hand, with a pen on a paper. You've already brought yourself from a position of not being able to write to being able to write. And I'm just going to help you take it to the next level so you can learn how to write articles and op-eds and editorials. Now, I've written literally thousands of them, thousands of articles, thousands of op-eds, thousands of editorials over the past 15 years. I've been a writer professionally for that time, so I have a few things I can teach you. And the first thing I want to teach you is the most important lesson, and that is, if you want to become a better writer, write. That's it. We could end the lesson today, and you would already know more than most people. Some people try it and they give up. I don't want you to give up. I want you to be a better writer, so I want you to write. And this is about creative output. You're going to be creating, and some people are under the mistaken impression that creativity is like a well, that if you just pull stuff out of it, eventually it's going to go dry, that you won't have anything left. That's not the case. Creativity, writing, is a muscle. The more you do it, the better you get at it, so keep writing. Now, the first thing that you write, or the second thing, or the third thing, is not going to be that good. In fact, it's not supposed to be good. If you think back to something that you've written perhaps 6 months ago, a year ago, 5 years ago, if you look at it now, it's kind of embarrassing. Don't be afraid if the first thing that you write is garbage. It should be garbage. I'm going to say that word again, garbage. It's part of the process. Don't get upset when what you're writing is not good. That's actually part of the process. Don't panic. Don't look at it like a wall. Look at it as a part of the process where everything you write is terrible, and then hug it and let it go and keep writing. Just keep writing. And here's another important lesson. Don't be afraid to cut. Now, we all have those little phrases in our minds, those little catchphrases, those beautifully crafted lines that we've written down, and we're just looking for some reason, some opportunity to place it into some article or some press release. Even if it doesn't fit, we're going to put it in there no matter what. You need to be able to cut those. Cut them. And there's a phrase for it. It's a little bit harsh, but I'm going to share it with you. It's called murder your darlings. These are your little darlings, and sometimes they don't belong in the thing that you're writing today, so don't force them in there. Cut them. Don't be afraid to cut, and then keep writing. Just keep writing. And the reason why you want to cut out those little darlings is because it's not your job to write your story. If you're writing an op-ed or an editorial about an issue that's important in the news today, you're not there to write what's on your mind and what matters to you. You're there to write the story, not your story. So focus on the story. Now, like I said, I've written literally hundreds of these. I've written for the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Fox News, CNN, NRO, Forbes. Things I've written have been on the Drudge Report repeatedly. And that's why I'm here to share this with you, because I've done it many, many times. And believe me, when I first started, it wasn't good. My first op-ed, my first editorial was not as good as my second. My second was not as good as my third. And none of that was as good as the stuff that I wrote last week. It gets better. It gets faster. You get good at this. And that's what I'm here to do today, to help you get good at this. So I want you to look at the structure that I'm laying out for you, okay? I'm going to show you how to do better sentences, better headlines, better leads, better articles, better content, the 5 W's and 1 H, and then finally we're going to talk about tone. So first I want to talk about sentences. Now, one of my favorite quotes is from Mark Twain. He wrote a long letter to a friend. It was a 3-page letter, and he apologized to his friend in the letter, and he said, "I'm sorry, I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long one instead." Now, what that means is, if you don't spend the time on the front end doing your work as a writer, you're going to wind up with long letters. You're going to wind up with long articles. You're going to wind up with long run-on sentences. When you do the work, doing the work results in short, compact, efficient sentences. Some people call it simple. Some people call it simplistic. It's neither of those. It's the highest level of writing. When you can reduce an idea down to 7 words and make it compelling and quick, you've shown your audience that you care enough about their time, you respect their time enough for you to do the work on the back end to make whatever it is that you came to say short, compact, and to the point. Now, Ronald Reagan said once, he said, "I've wondered at times what the 10 Commandments would have looked like if Moses had run it through the state legislature." Well, we don't have to wonder what it would look like. Here's exactly what it would look like. Here's a bill, a law designed to get rid of violent crime like murder. And it's 32,346 words long. It's so long, I'm pretty sure no one's ever read it, including the people who wrote it. They probably wrote it by committee, and if you look at the actual language, it's run-on sentences and very long multisyllabic words. It's terrible. The same idea can and was shared in a much more efficient way, shorter, more to the point. And while nobody's actually read this anti-violent crime bill, a lot of people have read the same sentiment expressed much more simply, not simplistically. This way: you shall not murder. In Hebrew, it's actually 2 words long, okay? So think about what more can you do on the front end to make that big complex thing that you want to communicate shorter, more to the point, make the complex understandable. And when you don't do it, you have these long run-on sentences like a professor who prattles on all day long with big, long, fancy words. He has no active listeners. And then you take someone like Rush Limbaugh, whose job description, the way he describes what he does best, is to take the complex and make it understandable. And he has 20 million active listeners. That's the difference. When you put in the hard work on the front end, you're demonstrating to your audience that you care about them, you make it compelling, and you make it understandable. Now let's talk about sentence structure. When was the last time that someone actually taught you how to write a sentence? It's probably been years. For some of you, it's been decades. Let's talk about a sentence structure. So what is a right, proper sentence structure? Well, let's start with a perfect sentence. A perfect sentence is, I love you. 3 words. It's one of the most powerful sentences in the world. And let's look at the structure, not just the words, not just what it means, but the structure. Subject, I, verb, love, you, object. I love you. It's powerful. Now let's think about how you could communicate the exact same thing in a non-linear and straightforward way. You could say, well, whereas I feel like you and I have been, loving each other, and I think that love is perhaps something that we should. No. I love you. Put a period at the end and stop talking. Put a period at the end and stop writing. Look through your sentences and ask yourself, could I make this simpler, more direct, to the point? Could I follow this sentence structure of subject, verb, and object? And do that for every one of your sentences, and pretty soon you're going to have a good entire article. And that's how to do good sentence structure. Now, what's in a sentence? Words. So let's look at the words. The words that you choose are important as well. And there's one particular kind of word that I want you to keep an eye open for and cut it the second you see it. Any word that ends in ing, I-N-G, I call the ing monster. Get rid of those. So make sure that when you're editing, and by the way, did I mention that you should be editing? You should be editing every single thing you write. Every sentence, every word, go over it time and time again. And please, when you're editing, make one entire pass just looking for the dreaded ing monster. Any word that ends in ing is a flashing light to you telling you, I need to probably cut this word and come up with a better, more active way to say the exact same thing. Ing indicates passive sentences, passive words. And so try to take those ings out and look and see if you can recreate that sentence without using the ing word, and I guarantee it's going to be more powerful, more straightforward. Now, the other thing I promised you in that list of deliverables is headline. So let's talk about headlines. You want to focus on your headlines because, frankly, everyone's busy, and I have something called the 3-second rule. The 3-second rule means you got 3 seconds of someone's attention before you lose their attention. What are you going to do in those 3 seconds? Well, you're going to do and make your point in 7 words or less. 7 words or less in a headline. If you can't make your point in 7 words or less, again, like Mark Twain, you're disrespecting your reader. Do the work, Get it down to 7 words or less. 3-second rule. Clock starts as soon as someone looks at your article. What are you going to do with those 3 seconds? Get it down to 7 words or less. And here's a good way to train yourself on how to do this. Think of it the way you think of an email subject line. Look through your very full inbox. If your inbox is full like mine, it's very full. Look for the ones that you've actually clicked and opened on, especially the marketing emails. Look at the ones, there's a dozen that you haven't clicked on, but there's one that you did click on. Look at what made you click. I can almost guarantee you that it's short and to the point, it's 7 words or less, and it's compelling, which is the next point we're going to make, compelling. Make it compelling. Make it interesting. Don't just make it short, make it compelling. Use tight words, short words. Don't use the ing words, use the short, punchy words. And here's the secret. The last point I want to make on this headline, ask a question. This is something I learned a long time ago. Questions are extremely powerful. So let me put it to you this way. If I tell you something, it's me telling you. If I ask you a question and you answer that question in your head, now it's your idea. Previously, it was my idea and I was just telling you. Now, if I ask you a question and you answer it in your own head, now it's your idea. And that's powerful. So let's look at these headlines. And these are good examples of headlines. Even though one goes a little bit long, it's so compelling, I kept it in there. And I want you to look. I want you to look at USA Today and Yahoo News. Look at the big news sites and see how they do their headlines. And if your headlines are any longer than theirs, or if theirs are any longer than 7 words, then you know something's going wrong. So keep it down to 7 words and get your whole point across in a headline. And after the headline is the second most important thing. Let's say you've used those 3 seconds that you have of someone's attention to the fullest, and you've got them to begin to read your story that you've written. How you begin your article, it's called the lead, is very important because you could lose them at this point. After you've done all the work of coming up with a great headline, a great issue, in the lead, don't lose them. And what that means is you might have heard the phrase, don't bury the lead. That means don't take the most interesting part of what you are going to write about and stick it in paragraph 3. Don't assume that they're going to stay with you through your beautifully crafted opening flourish of words before you get to the point, the meat of the matter, the lead. Don't bury your lead. Put it right up front and look at how USA Today does it and Yahoo News and all the big news sites. If you've got just that little bit of space, think about how you can get your reader interested in about what you're about to say in that first lead. And there's a great example right there. Now, I want to share with you something. This is what I call a near-perfect story in almost every way. So let's look at the headline. When I say near-perfect, it's not perfect. The headline is 8 words long, not 7. It says, U.S. funding for future promises lags by trillions. You read that, you know what it's about. Now let's look at the lead. The good lead tells you what happened, and it gives you a quick context. It says the federal government's financial condition deteriorated rapidly last year, far beyond the $1.5 trillion in new debt taken on to finance the budget deficit. That tells you what's going on in this story. Next, make news. Don't just give people your opinion. Actually try to break some news. Make your news story contain news. And this one does. The next paragraph, it says, that brings to a record $61.6 trillion, the total of financial promises not paid for. When this article came out, that was news. $61 trillion in promises from the government. It's called unfunded liabilities, not paid for, first reported here. That's news. Now, if I was writing this article, 2 criticisms I'm going to share with you, 3 actually. The headline should have been 7 words. This piece of news should have been a little bit higher, but at least it's there. Make sure it's in yours. And then the third one's coming up in a second. Next paragraph, provide context. Okay, so you said this fact. Now give them some context to make it make sense to them. 61.6 trillion is a large number, but it doesn't mean a lot to folks. Show context, and they do right here. They say it's more than 1/3 of the nation's gross domestic product. Okay, that's context. You can put it into context. Okay, now I get it. And then if you look at the next page, this is the most important part, and I would have put this way up front, but at least it's here. But just pay attention. This is one of the most important things. What does it mean to the reader? We don't write articles. You don't write articles so you can hear yourself write or you can see yourself write. You're there to give something of value, a piece of information, to your reader. What's in it for them? They're asking that. What does it matter to them? And here's what it matters to the readers of this article. The $61.6 trillion in unfunded obligations amounts to $528,000 per household. That's what it means to you. That's context, that's consequences. The trillions or whatever, but I know that you, the reader, owe $528,000, and that matters to you. Now let's talk about content, the next item on the list. What's it all about? Now, one of the things I teach is called riding the wave. And what does that mean? Well, you could take some brand new issue that never existed before, and you're the first person to come up with this brilliant idea, and now you want the whole world to know about it. Well, how are you going to get that idea out to everybody? It's difficult. Think of it like an advertising agency, an advertising campaign, and your idea is the product. Well, in order to make that new idea, that new product, permeate through the entire society, it would cost hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions. Now, you don't have that much money or time to take your brilliant idea and share it with the whole world so that everyone across the country knows exactly what you're saying. So what you do is you ride the wave. You take big stories that are riding through the media, wave stories, and you see if the article that you wanted to craft can fit into that, can ride that wave, can relate to that story, and then you ride the wave. Now, one of the other things I want to talk about is quotes and research. When you're looking for quotes to prove your point, and I'm going to talk about this in a couple slides, you want to know how to be able to choose the right quotes to make your point. And we'll get into that in something called the hierarchy of proof. The next thing you want to do is have quotes from both sides. You want to make it a little bit as balanced as you can, both sides, otherwise it's just a diatribe. And then you want to make it relate to your audience. Again, like tell people exactly what this would cost their family. And then you want to give value to your audience. This is the most important thing. What's in it for them? Right? What's in it for you today? I'm trying to give you value. I'm trying to give you a checklist here. If you just take this course that I'm teaching right now and go through it, you're going to be a better writer. You can use these tools. These are tools that you can use to become a better writer. I'm trying to give you value. And in your article that you craft, you should try to give value to your readers. Don't just write for the sake of seeing yourself write. Write to give some value to your audience, and they'll give back to you by giving you their attention. So here's an example of riding the wave. One of the biggest stories in the country at the time of this recording is what's happening with the Ukraine and Russia. What does that mean? People of Ukraine want freedom. Okay, now we have the topic of freedom on the table. And it's one of the #1 issues in the world. If you were to spend all the money it took to get that issue on the front pages, it would cost you hundreds of millions, if not billions. Now the topic of freedom is kind of in the air. So write an article about freedom. We don't deal with foreign policy issues, but talk about freedom. It's a subject that people are talking about right now, so you can make your article relate to that. Or look at the newspapers today. What's the #1 story in the world? What's everybody talking about? What's everyone buzzing about? Take a theme that you're comfortable with, that you want to communicate, and see if you can ride that wave. Now here is the hierarchy of proof. And over the past 15 years, I've been teaching writing and research, and this has proven to be one of the most useful tools for people to take and just pin it up on the wall and use over and over and over. When you're looking for a proof point to buttress what you're saying, to prove what you're saying, if I just write something, that's just me saying it. If I write something and then have other quotes to support what I'm saying, that's a proof point. And when you're looking for those proof points, when you're researching, you want to be able to distinguish what's good and what's great and what's not so great. And this hierarchy of proof is a good checklist for you to check, am I looking for the best possible quotes to prove my case? So let's say we're talking about some politician or some public figure who did something or said something. The #1 possible proof quote is to actually say, they said this. They did this. Quote them. Don't quote yourself. Don't quote a third-party expert. Quote them in their own words. And then the next level down from that is they voted this way. Next level down from that is their party voted this way. And if you want to look for a media quote to support your point, if you're a conservative, it's always better to take a top-level mainstream left-wing proof point as your proof point. So if you're writing a conservative article, take your proof point to prove your point from the New York Times if you can find it. Dig, dig, dig until you find it. It's better that way. So look through this hierarchy of proof And write it out and print it out and keep it with you, because when you research, you don't want to waste time. Research can take a lot of time. This will help you focus on what matters and what's most effective to your audience. And again, next on the list is related to your audience. Make sure that you're always focused on what does it mean to your reader. And I'll go back again to that example. People don't understand terms like billions and trillions, but if you tell them how much in dollars that they owe because of these problems, if you make it relate to your audience, then they're going to resonate with your article. And give value to your audience, like I just said before. Did you teach them something new? Are they better off for having read your article? And most importantly, what's in it for them? Always focus on what's in it for them. Don't just write for the sake of writing. Ask yourself what's in it for them and then give it to them. The next point on the list is the most basic thing that people are taught when they're taught how to write and report and to write articles, but sometimes we forget, or maybe you haven't heard this in a while. So write this one down as well, the 5 W's and 1 H. Make sure your article contains all of these: who, what, when, where, why, and how. Write it down, keep it by what you're writing, and use it as a checklist. One of the edits that you do, one of the passes through that you edit, make sure, just check it off. Did I do who? Did I find what? Did I relate the information as to when it happened? And when you get those checked off, you've got a good, solid story. Now, this is the point that I want to leave you with, and it's actually the most important point. Tone is critical. The tone of your writing is important. And I know that when we're moved to write something, usually it's about a problem. It's about a problem that we want to overcome. Something gets us all riled up and we want to write about it. But it's important that when you're writing that you have the correct tone. You want the tone of being a happy warrior, not someone who's grumpy, and not someone who's griping. It's not someone who's angry. You want to be a happy warrior. And if we look at two perfect examples of happy warrior versus grumpy, let's compare Ronald Reagan to perhaps a more recent candidate for president from the Republicans. One of them lost, the other one won double back-to-back landslides. Be a happy warrior when you're writing. Make your pieces light in tone, happy warrior, not grumpy, and that's key. So let's just recap the whole list of all the different tools, and if you use these tools, you will become a better writer. What you wrote yesterday will not be as good as what you write today, and after today's lesson, I guarantee you that what you're going to write tomorrow will be even better, and then just keep writing. Focus on sentences, simple, short, headlines, 7 words or less. The lead, make your lead compelling. Make your article tight. Content, make it compelling. Ride the wave. 5 W's and 1 H. Don't forget those. Use them as a checklist. And finally, tone. Happy warrior, not Mr. Grumpy. How do you become a better writer? Write. How do you become even better? Keep writing.